All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Sail Through the Standards MAP. My name is Jan Moody, and I'm excited to be here. So thank you for tuning in live. Please take the poll that you see as you log in. This gives us a better idea of who's in the audience so that we are able to cater this webinar to make sure that we are fitting everybody's needs. So I'm hoping that everybody can see my screen and everybody can hear me okay. I think that the answer to both of those is yes, based off of the messages coming into the chat. So before we officially dive into things, there are just a few housekeeping items for us to go over. First is, I just mentioned the chat. Please feel free to use this throughout the entire webinar to ask any questions or add any commentary or insights. We want this to be a very interactive experience, and so we encourage you to actively use the chat to make sure that you're tuning in and chiming in any way that you want. The important thing with the chat is to make sure that it is set to all panelists and attendees. This way, everybody is able to see your comments and can respond appropriately. So that leads into my next segue, which is on questions. At the bottom of your screen, you also see a little Q&A bubble. I encourage you to use this throughout the entire webinar as well to ask any questions that you may have. I am joined in the room today by my colleague Ileana Betancourt and then also John Chen. So I encourage you to ask any questions that you may have through the Q&A bubble or using the chat, and then we will make sure that we get back to you with those questions. Awesome. So I'm sure that many of you who are already here are quite familiar with Edulastic. But I did want to just give a little bit of background on Edulastic for those who are brand new. It seems like based on the results of our poll, we have some people from all over the board, so that's really awesome. So Edulastic is an online digital assessment platform for K-12 students, teachers, and districts. There are over 30 technology-enhanced items, over 35,000 items in the Edulastic Certified Item Bank, and 30,000 publicly available assessments. Some really great things about Edulastic is the data that comes with it. And so that includes standards tracking, mastery reports, and other really powerful graphs and data that I think Latasha, our panelist, will touch on later. Another thing that's really cool about Edulastic is that it mimics the look and feel of state assessments. And this is what this specific webinar really focuses on, that when students are taking an assessment on Edulastic, that it really mimics and it mirrors what state tests look like. And so this allows students to kind of get a feel for what testing day when it comes to state tests will feel like, because they're able to practice using Edulastic. The other thing that I wanted to mention regarding Edulastic and the basics of using this powerful online digital assessment platform is that we just last week hosted an Edulastic 101 webinar. And so while today's webinar is going to focus on MAP specifically and using Edulastic to prepare for this Missouri assessment program, last week we did have a webinar that focused on the basics of using a free Edulastic teacher account. So if you are new to Edulastic and if you're interested in learning about the basics of Edulastic, I encourage you to check that out on our YouTube channel. And I'm hoping that Ileana can share the link for that in the chat. So here's a little bit of background on the MAP, which stands for Missouri Assessment Program. It's given to all public school students in grades 3 through 8. That includes ELA and math take it, all grades 3 through 8, and then science only takes it in grades 5 and 8. The Missouri Assessment Program test has been around since 1993, and each year it's given in the spring, so from the beginning of April to the end of May. One really important thing that we're focusing on today is that MAP is administered online now. And the reason that this is really important is because, important to our webinar, is because Edulastic is a great tool that you can use to practice for those online tests so that your students aren't necessarily stumped by the fact that the test is online and they can really just focus on the questions. So overall, the test is used to gauge overall quality of education in Missouri. It's helped to identify student strengths, weaknesses, and areas to improve for both the teacher and the student. And then it also measures how well students acquire those Missouri learning standards. And the important thing to point out with this is that on Edulastic, every single item and assessment is tied to a standard. And so this makes it really easy for teachers to be able to track standards and to track students and to understand how they need to adjust their instruction in order to support their students as best as they can. So I wanted to point out that you can access Missouri Assessment Program MAP released items on Edulastic. So the Missouri Department of Education releases these items and then we share them to the Edulastic library. So you can either assign them as is to your class, or you can edit them and duplicate them and tweak them as needed to fit the needs of your students. So in order to find these released items, you log into Edulastic, you head over to the assessment library, You select the subject that you're looking for using this little toggle feature right here that I'm highlighting. And then you search Missouri up here in the search bar. And then all of these great assessments will pop up that you can use in your classroom to help your students prepare for MAP. We have an Edulastic innovator team who we recently asked what is their favorite thing about using Edulastic to prepare for state tests. And these are some of the things that they said, and I thought that it would be nice to share some of them. So Teresa Bunker said, I find the tech enhanced question options and number and quality of questions very useful. Having the ability to search by standard, really make strategic and targeted decisions using the data to drive my instruction, reteach, and enrichment is so valuable. My students and I appreciate the real-time results we get during an assessment or activity using Edulastic. I thought that this was nice, and I know that she mentioned using data to drive instruction, and this is something that Latasha will focus on later, is those really powerful reports that Edulastic provides and how you can use those to adjust your instruction and best support your students. So lastly, before I pass things off to our awesome panelists, I wanted to talk about how teachers in Missouri specifically are using Edulastic to prepare for MAP. And so I did a little search on Twitter and I found a couple really nice tweets here that I wanted to share. And Tori shared that, hey, Missouri educators, the Missouri Department of Education put their MAP release items on Edulastic for schools to practice the content with tech enhanced tools. The results on Edulastic are also great for, again, that data-driven instruction. And that's so helpful. Thank you to both, says Tori. So thank you, Tori. That's really great. And this is what I hope that everybody who's attending this webinar can begin to do after today. So at this time, without further ado, I'm going to pass things off to Latasha. She is a 5th grade math and science teacher from Raytown, Missouri, and she teaches at Blue Ridge Elementary. Latasha has presented in several Edulastic webinars before and always has really great things to share. So we're excited to have her back. Thank you, Latasha, for taking the time. So at this time, I am going to turn off my video and mute myself, and then I will let you start sharing your screen, Latasha.
All right. Hi. Again, as she introduced me, I'm Latasha Roland. I teach at Blue Ridge Elementary in Raytown. I'm going to basically go through how I use Edulastic to prepare for MAP. So let me share my screen. All right. I go through a process. It's about a 4 to 5 week process that I call the MAP Blitz. I've been doing it since I've been teaching. I used it in the Carolinas where I came from, and I pulled it over here when I moved to Missouri. So the process is basically as you see on the screen. I do a mock MAP on Edulastic. The beauty of that is what Jan just shared is that I didn't know last year, but they do have the release items on. You'll see what I just created my own. We do this before spring break. I take the spring break to go through an intense data analysis to form my small groups. And from my small groups, I then design a Blitz schedule. It's a 3-week intensive process with my students now. We really go hard to prepare for what I consider my huge sports fans. I call the MAP, it's our game time. So my students now, we talk all year about you play how you practice. So we lead everything up to practice and plan for that game. So without further ado, my Edulastic Mock MAP is a 3-in-3 model. So what that means is I simulate the MAP experience. We have 3 sessions in 3 days. I break up my class, I literally break up my classroom and how they will sit in for the MAP. I kind of tailor the directions to what I want to do for them. I scale it back because the MAP traditionally for the release size is about 42 questions, so I do scale it back to about 34. So it's about the first 2 sessions are 15 questions, and I still keep the last session at 4. I do know there is a performance event happening this year based off what people within my district have told me. And Edulastic has the cool audio controls as well. So I do let kids say, hey, if you want the question read to you, get practice with that, just so they can have that experience, because I know that we do have audio turned on throughout the MAP, and they can have the questions read to them. So that's just how the brief little overview of my mock MAP. So how that looks is session 1 and 2, I try to tailor it to based on what they're going to see. So I break it up within it's 4 domains, but prior to Missouri going back to the Missouri standards, it was 5. So I still break it down in 5 domains. And I typically have my fractions and my decimals with the most questions because I know that's about 50% of the map. And then I kind of do the rest of the questions with the rest of the domains there. And so the first 2 sessions are about 15 questions, and the last session, which is typically, I don't know if they're switching to performance event this year or not, but instead of doing decimals, my students had to do more fractions because we struggled throughout the year within the fraction domain. And so what we're going to just walk through basically a look into what math looked like at the math map in room 214. And we departmentalize here at Blue Ridge, so I had 3 blocks. So we're going to look at my block 3 data from the mock map. The really cool thing about Edulastic that I really love is I'm a huge data nerd. So for some people, if you look at this brief overview, some people will get freaked out. I have my teammate, she does not like data, so seeing this will like really just bring detriment to her. But I like the fact that I can say, okay, here based on the map, Edulastic is a great thing about saying proficient, basic, and below basic. So based on the 15 questions on session 1, this is where the overall score where my kids scored. If you look at the bubble, most of my kids are like targeting below basic right now. So the one thing is you don't want to stay focused on just this particular map, this particular data set, because Edulastic then takes it a little deeper, and that's the deep dive that I love to do, that I used to do paper pencil that I don't have to do anymore. So the next slide is basically looking at all the questions, and they're linked to the standard that I selected. So if you notice that I'm having like basic, you saw the data before, you're like, oh wow, you have 60% of your kids who are targeting below basic. But if you look at my data broken down based on these standards, some of my students are doing okay in certain areas, and there are certain areas where we're struggling. And so when I begin to think about how I'm going to set up my 3 weeks of this Blitz, this 3 to 5 weeks preparing for the map, I focus on the areas that have the lowest. They're typically between 0 to like 40%, is where I'm like, okay, that's going to be a whole group instruction time because we are still struggling in these content areas. And I do want to point out this caveat. I have not taught all my content just yet either. So some of these areas we just haven't hit yet as a class. But the areas that typically between that 50 range to about 69%, that's where I begin to formulate my small groups, because within those areas, that's where some of my kids are like hitting at varying levels. So if you notice these 2 areas, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing fractions, my kids struggled last year with that, and then they were still struggling with multiplying fractions. So these are the 2 areas I'll say I have to make sure I teach these whole group within the Blitz, at the same time giving them at-bats within station work, at the same time pulling small groups. So it's like a 3-prong approach there. So I created small groups based on the data. And if you see here, this is based on where all my students performed based on those 4 domains that the map has rolled out. If you notice, if you look closely, the one student is not in the same group. So my orange will be my high flyers, the purple groups is my grade level, middle of the road, and then my blue, those are my kids who are that have not mastered it yet. And in the decimals and algebra particularly, I had kids either they got it or they didn't get it. That's just kind of how it felt. They either got it or they didn't. And I typically do that all percentages as well. 80% is always mastery, and I just kind of break it down from there. I was able to pull those groups based off of this sheet here. This is like the bread and butter that I love to use with the Edulastic system throughout any assessment piece that I'm doing throughout the school year. But this is particularly what I use when I'm preparing for the map. I look at the the standards based on where we're at. And if you look particularly on like multiplying fractions, this standard right here, this is where I know my kids did okay. I think we are at 60% proficiency, but if you look closer, I have like 1, 2, 3, this is not the whole class, I have 4 kids who got 0%, meaning they didn't get any points for that question. There's 2. I have some where I got 1 point but missed the other, and I have a couple kids who got both points. So depending on, it could be 1 question, it could be 2 questions. Based on that, that's kind of how I begin to break down my small groups using this particular data point. Now, because I have 3 sessions, I literally count all the questions per session, And then I haven't figured out how Edulastic do that, so I kind of do that on my own with paper pencil at that point. And so this is basically an overview of my week of how I set up. As I was explaining to you before, I typically do whole group for 30 minutes. It doesn't matter where the kids fall. Because we have a short day on Wednesday, we don't have time. I don't have time to pull small groups. All my kids are in station work. The station work can be a game, which they're doing a group. It could be independent, or they have a choice of a choice board. So if you notice, I typically try to make things more flowful, so that's why I weave in all the other content. So like at this point, this particular week, kids were doing volume work, they were doing geometry work, we were reviewing some PEMDAS, some algebra, they had choice board, which has a myriad of things, and the choice boards are tailored to my small groups, and then powers of 10. And so that's kind of how we work, I work and weave in all the other things based on the map data, the mock map data. And here's where I was telling you about my small groups. So if I focus in on that one standard, the below level kids were still struggling with adding, subtracting fractions. So I started them there. Whereas my grade level kids really needed, they needed mixed numbers with regrouping, particularly subtracting. Whereas my high kids were still struggling with that as well. So I was able to really just kind of tailor the groups. And if you notice, I met with my logo level group kids 3 times out the week, whereas opposed to the other 2 groups 4. I try to, it's a really intense 50 minutes where we're just, I'm circulating, they're rotating, we're moving and shaking. So that leads me to the data point. So I go back to Edulastic. I don't just stop at my mock map. At that point, we do 2 types of data points. My kids do a daily mix review on paper, where it's basically 1 question per strand. And then each day, that's like their do now, the warm up. We do it. They have the first 10 minutes to do it. We take 5 minutes to go over it. And then every Monday, they basically track their data. So if fractions, for instance, if they got 3 out of the 5 questions that correctly, 25 questions total, then they're saying, all right, fractions is my area of strength right now. And then they track what area they need to grow in. And then that's how they begin to tailor what they want to do within the station work throughout the week. And then at the end of each week on Friday, we do a weekly mini mastery quiz in Edulastic. So that's where I come back. I loop back to Edulastic. I create a mini mastery, and I do mix it in. I don't want them to get accustomed to just one content, so I do mix it in and mix it up. And that's where we begin to see the growth, from the mock map to leading up to map. So particularly on this mock map question, this particular question, they struggled really bad on the session 3. And session 3 was all fractions. It was 4 questions, and this is where they kind of just bombed with this block 3. So after 2 weeks of instruction and then getting it both in whole groups and in small groups, my kids went from 21% to 79% proficiency, particularly my purple and blue, because my orange were okay. My highlighters were particularly okay. So that's really a snapshot of how I literally use Edulastic in that small window, but I do this throughout the year. That's the one thing I love about this system, is that it's a all-year approach. I do the same thing, take the same approach with my small group instructions right now. We're in knee-deep fractions, and I have in one block 3 groups going. When another block, I have 4 groups going. If they don't move up until they get out, till they pass to the next level out of it, and they're constantly, and they love getting the results back. When kids get a 20% the first time they take the quiz and they retake it and they get the 90%, they're eager to walk to show me their Chromebook, even though I can see it on my teacher portal that they're doing better. But that is all I have. So thank you, and then I'll take it share back over to Jan.
Awesome. I will start sharing my screen. All right, are you able to see that?
Yes.
Great, and I'll start my video here too. Thank you, Latasha. That was a really amazing presentation, and I loved all the data that you showed. We did have a few questions roll in through the chat, and some of them you already touched on, but I figure it's worth kind of bringing back to light. We had Sue was wondering if you are doing these map blitzes all year long, or if you really focus on them like the month leading up to the state test.
I typically focus on the blitz a month up into the state test, but how that my math workshop, I tend to roll my math workshop the same way. So currently right now, doing my workshop, I do pull a small group, I teach in the actually small group setting. So I have 3 groups going. Each group gets their own tailored design lesson. While if I'm working with group 1, groups 2 and 3 are working on their choice board, either a choice board or some type of game. So I kind of do a little bit of like the MAP Blitz throughout the year. The only difference is it's just ramped up another level for that last 4 to 5 weeks of instruction leading up to the MAP.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. We also had another person wondering, how many years did you work to develop this system? Kristen says that it's very impressive.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've been tweaking it over the years. I started like year 1 of teaching. And this is my year in the classroom. I'm in year 11. So I kind of just tweaked it as I went. Like the really great thing about Edulastic is I came from a state where we didn't take our state test on the computer, and I panicked. I was in panic mode, and my principals gave me this cool system. She said, "Don't tell nobody you're using it, because then they'll start emailing us, and the district will get mad." So I kind of started using it, and I just kind of really took what I did, paper pencil, and just transferred it to Edulastic. And it's one of those things where I'm tweaking it as I go every year.
Awesome. Well, it definitely is really impressive. How would you change the system for a non-block schedule?
The beauty of this, it works when I taught all subjects. It works the same. It's more preparation because it's another subject. So I used it when I taught reading as well. It's the same type of approach. I just like whatever, I would always get permission to see if I could extend my block to make sure I can fit everything in. So like right now we have 90 minutes per block. So like when I did this in North Carolina, I typically took some time off of my writing block to increase it. So my 90 minutes for reading and then my 90 minutes for math. And then I just kind of figure out how to fit writing in the process. So you could tailor it either way.
Great. And then we have a couple questions regarding like accessibility of your assessments. People are wondering if these are shared publicly on Edulastic.
I currently don't have my assessments shared publicly, but I can. The beauty of Edulastic is I really do use I use kind of the same thing, so I can make my assessments public, and you can, but a lot of the questions I have and I pull from they have such a great wealth of a bank of questions. I typically use some of the same questions every year. Particularly, our kids are always struggling with technology enhanced, but yeah, I can make them public, for sure.
Sue just said, yes, please. She said, we don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. So then our next question is, Sue is also wondering if she has a choice board we could see an example of, or if you have this information on Teachers Pay Teachers.
I don't have the information on Teachers Pay Teachers. That's so funny. My friend was telling me I need to share that. I could share one what one looks like real quick if you would like to see what one looks like for MAP and which one looks like we're doing right now, because I kind of tweak them as I go.
Sure. That would be great. Do you want to reshare your screen, Latasha?
Yeah.
Okay, let me stop sharing and you can take over.
Okay. Oh no. Okay, there we go. So how do I'll share? Here we go. So we go here. Sorry, I'm tweaking with this. So I'll show you one real quick that I'm using, the kids are using currently. That's not one. There it is. So this is how I tweaked it this year, but this is something they're using currently. So I tell the kids where they need to start. And I use a multitude of different systems, like online programs. And so this is kind of how one looks like right now. And so some has videos, some has Khan. I like that we are very heavy into Greg Payne here. So we do a lot of Tangy puzzles. If you haven't heard of him, I suggest you highly recommend you get on with this. And also I make some to show the kids got games, because the kids don't want to do work. They actually want games. So that's kind of that's how one looks. And then let me get to my Blitz folder. Sorry, let's see. And my Blitz. No. Sorry. Into the wrong folder. There it is. Let's see, this is the MAP Blitz from last year. And I tend to make a folder each year because I tweak every year. So this is kind of what the kids got last year. And so anything that is labeled an MD, that was like a must do. They had to do it. And I typically tell them when they could do it. So certain things didn't open up until after they had to sit through my lesson. But if they had the FC, that's a free choice. And so they can do that at any point they want. So I try to give them a little combination of both, a little wiggle room, but a little thing. So like this one went over, I want to say almost 2 weeks before I had to print out and do another one. That's a tweak I had to make from the year before where I was moving faster than the choice board. So I kind of had to figure out how can I slow it down. And that's kind of the system I worked out last year is I'm going to give them the must-dos, and then I'm going to give them free choices.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I think so. Sue, do you want to type in the chat to see if you have any follow-up questions for that? And then Latasha, in the meantime, I'm going to take back over sharing, and I just have a few other quick slides to show everyone before we
Sounds good.
things. So I will share.
Right.
Great. Are you able to see my screen? Awesome.
Yes.
So thank you, Latasha, for explaining all that. We really appreciate it. I want to point out that we have an Edulastic resource page where you can go to get any further questions answered. So you'll find help with Edulastic, other training resources, links to other webinars, some teaching strategies, and so much more on this page. So I encourage you to go check it out. I also want to point out that our support team here at Edulastic is really wonderful. And if you, for whatever reason, don't see your standards or you just have any other questions about Edulastic, you always can reach out to them. And the email for that is support@edulastic.com. We'll be really happy to help you with any questions that you may have. Also, this is the first webinar in this Sail Through the Standards webinar series. So we have 7 more webinars coming up. And I know that everybody here today is from Missouri, but perhaps you know other teachers scattered around the country. So I really encourage you to share this webinar series with them. And I think Ileana can share the link maybe in the chat right now. So the other really exciting thing is I hope that everybody has heard about our live attendee swag giveaway. And so now is the time for our live attendee swag giveaway. So maybe we can get a little drum roll or something. Okay, so we randomly selected a live attendee and the winner is Bria Holmes. Awesome. Congratulations, Bria. We have your email from your registration. And so you will be winning an Edulastic swag package. And so we will email you to get your mailing address. So congratulations and thank you for joining us live. I also want to point out that over here you see some features in an Edulastic Teacher Premium account. And at the end of this entire webinar series, we will compile all of the live attendees and randomly select 2 attendees to win Edulastic Teacher Premium. So keep an eye on your email because even if you didn't win the swag package today, there's a chance that you could win an Edulastic Teacher Premium account, which includes so many more amazing features. So again, congratulations, Bria, and I will be sending you an email. So thank you everybody for joining us and thank you Latasha for presenting. I think that we had some awesome questions and some really nice feedback in the chat. I encourage everybody to stay in touch with us through our YouTube channel, our Twitter, our Facebook, our Instagram, and our LinkedIn. Our handle for all of those is @Edulastic. And we'd really appreciate it if you took the survey that you'll see after you log out of the webinar so that we can continue to improve for future webinars. So we will hang out online and answer any other lingering questions. But again, thank you so much for joining us today and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.